The previous basket is under review.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the Basket Under Review podcast. I'm your host, as ever, Eamon Brennan, a buzzer at eamonbrennan.com. That's my newsletter. Go check it out. Go check out Basket Under Review as well, the home of this podcast, the coolest new college basketball website on the planet. We're back again for another week with our guest, Tate Frazier of The Ringer. We are going to talk about everything meaningful that happened in college basketball over the past weekend. Not a huge theme this week. We're going to talk about Michigan showing some humanity, showing that they can bleed, which was not something I really expected, honestly. I don't want to say I thought they would go undefeated in Big Ten play, but I expected them, if they lost, to lose to like the really, really good teams in the Big Ten, and they had a wobble this past week, potentially a useful wobble for Dusty May, given the way he sort of treated it in the post game. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Nebrasketball, continuing to Nebrasketball people. Indiana being the latest victim. Not that I'm sure many of the fans noticed, given it was like 12 hours after the latest biggest win in Indiana football history. We'll talk about a little bit about Illinois, Iowa. We'll talk about Boogie Fland going off against Tennessee and the ceiling for Florida when their guards actually play well. We'll talk about Mark Pope talking about suicide, kind of, sort of, not really, but mostly we'll talk about the reaction to him and sort of his where he stands with Kentucky fans and how they're reacting to kind of everything he says these days and sort of the over emotional overwroughtness of it all. We'll do a little mid-major corner. We got to check in on some mid-major-ish teams, your St. Louis, your Miamis of Ohio. We got to talk about what happened to Chicago State because it's the craziest thing I've ever seen in a college basketball game. Truly, like quite possibly the craziest thing I've ever seen in a college basketball game, except the time that Ed Cooley hit a baby in the face with an empty water bottle, and much more besides. But before we get to all that, as ever, I want to encourage you to go to basketunderreview.com. $10 a month. You sign up. You support this program. You support all the stuff that we put out for free on podcasts and YouTube feeds. You get access to the Trilly Donovan Discord, where he breaks news, where there's a huge community. You get all the written stuff on the website, which I promise will make you smarter about college basketball. You will understand so much more of what you see on a given night in a college basketball game, reading the website every day. It's a great value proposition. It's the place to be for college basketball fans in 2026. So basketunderreview.com, $10 a month. Thanks to everyone supporting us, and thanks to everyone at the website for all the great work that they're doing. Also, check out our presenting sponsor, Homefield Apparel, at homefieldapparel.com. Look, man, it's Homefield. They've been draining my wallet for weeks on end now because every time Indiana wins a football game, they come out with new awesome stuff that I feel like I need to buy, and then I do it. And then Indiana wins another football game, and then the cycle repeats. It's a dangerous and awesome place to be, and it's been a lot of fun. On the football side, it's also been a lot of fun to see what Homefield's coming up with. They're also big into basketball these days. They were just in Gainesville for the Tennessee-Florida game this past weekend on their Homefield house tour, where they have sort of like a pregame experience booth for you to check out as you go into the game. Their next date is January 27th in Bloomington for Purdue, Indiana, which will be a huge game. And a really fun one. So go check out Homefield, check out the house tour dates, stop by, tell them Basket Under Review sent you, buy something, and thank you to Homefield as ever for sponsoring our show. Okay, intro over. We're in the podcast. Tate, how was your week? How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I'm trying to get it all together. Like you said, I mean, there's a lot happening. It's a new year, as we know. We're all kind of finding our footing in the new year. And we got football right in front of our faces right now. We got NFL playoffs. So there's just a lot of sports that are on my television. We got HBO Sunday Nights back, Industry. Great show. If you're not watching it, go check it out, everybody out there. So a lot of TV. I have a lot of notes from these games. And I was kind of reading back my notes because, there's just been, I've been inundated with so much, sports and games and facts and figures and notes and all this sort of stuff that I feel like it's all kind of become a hodgepodge in my mind. And that's the part of this podcast that I'm excited about, because the podge can turn into a pod where you and I kind of sift through all of the mayhem and all the madness and try to make sense of what happened in college basketball. And I feel like the real star, the main character, is Michigan, and I'm excited to talk about it all, man.
Yeah, we're going to get to Michigan. I mean, it's interesting talking to you because you at The Ringer, you guys, as you sort of alluded to there, not only do you have the pop culture stuff that you guys are doing, you also have the sort of all sports, like NFL, college football, NBA focus. Mm-hmm. And I've while I follow those sports, I play fantasy football somewhat seriously with guys I've been playing with for like 20 years. And so we all take it seriously. So I pay attention to the NFL. But like this is like the first year where I've been really actually focused on like following a college football season this late in the year for obvious reasons, right? Because Indiana, like I said, they keep winning football games and doing so in spectacular fashion. Also, the Bears are apparently good now, which has been really fun. That was like a slow burn from like the beginning of the year. Like, oh, yep, the Bears are bad again. I don't have to pay attention to this team again, and now they're awesome, and I'm like completely dialed in to them. And so it was a kind of a weird week because it was so much sports happening all the time, and it was the first time I felt like this deep into January. I was like, I have to get back to college basketball. Because I've always just been so college basketball focused in my coverage and my work. It's never been a challenge. I've never been this distracted by other sports happening at the same time, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I mean, Saturday, the iPad, the computer, the TV, everything is occupied, and then you're also just trying to live like your normal life as well. So you said it. I mean, it's hard to kind of keep up with everything, and you try to keep up with all the minutia of everything as well, because not only do you have to, watch it and then try to, marinate on what happened, you have to kind of, dissect it and analyze it and be an expert on it at some level too. So, it's a very...
Not sound dumb on the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to sound like an idiot. And also, like, as we know with college basketball, right? Every fan base watches every single possession of every single game. So you're just trying to be fair to everybody out there. So, I mean, look, we're not trying to do the whole, woe is me act, but we're just basically saying there's a lot that was happening. If things get, muddied in our minds, we're probably going to laugh at each other, and we're going to have some fun trying to figure out what we learned. And the middle of the week, I mean, it started with great stuff. I mean, the Vanderbilt Nate Oates thing was nice. You know what I mean? So that was kind of, I feel like the middle of the week had my full attention college basketball wise. Saturday, like I said, I was bouncing all around, because I do the gambling show with Sal, so I have to watch all these NFL playoff games. So it's a lot of that as well. My Panthers got their heart ripped out, not as much as the Packers did by your Bears, but it was close. It was one of those games that, you'll think about as you wake up in the middle of the night. But a lot of good college basketball, and anytime you have a situation where Wisconsin, a program that has obviously had a lot of tried and true tradition, has a big win against a team like Michigan that we felt like could not bleed. We now have learned they're human. That was a big storyline. So we got a lot to get to, so I'm excited.
For sure. And there's nothing quite to snap you back into, oh yeah, this is the heart of college basketball season, than a Wisconsin-Michigan CBS game in the afternoon with Kevin Harlan, Bill Raftery, and Robbie Hummel on the call. It's just like, give me all this you got. And it was a great game. Great game, great trio, high energy throughout the broadcast and throughout the game. And, first of all, we have to say, like, an incredible performance by Wisconsin, particularly offensively. Just could not miss. I think they ended up 46% from three on high
15 threes.
Yeah. Like, I mean, they shot the lights out, played incredibly well on the offensive end, and gave Michigan the kind of performance, I think, that, to kind of cut to the post-game press conference almost. I think there was two performances last week for Michigan that are the exact kind of performances that you want to ward off if you're Dusty May and the head coach of a team this good that you think can win a national title, which I think Michigan, with the possible exception of Arizona, probably is the favorite to win the national title. And it's the sluggish, blah game against the team you should be beating by a lot more when they played against Penn State, right? And then there's a game against a good team, a Wisconsin team that we'll see how the rest of the season plays out. I wrote in my newsletter just before the new year, I think Wisconsin is one of those teams that you could kind of like buy stock in right now. This was well before the Michigan game of just like, I think they'll do their normal Wisconsin stuff in Big Ten play as they kind of always do, kind of hit or miss in the non-conference, and then they'll, win 12, 13, 14 games in the league and by the end of the season be like a 6 or a 7 seed or something like that, right? So that's the kind of team you could see on the second weekend. Penn State's the kind of team, with all due respect to Penn State, that you see if you're Michigan closer to the first weekend of the tournament. And you want to weed out these kind of performances. You want to figure out how to win these games. And they managed to do it against Penn State, although, kind of fortunately, like there are a couple Penn State shots that go down, and that's a loss. and that maybe should have gone, well, not should have, but could very easily have gone down, right? And then the Wisconsin game is the like, okay, this team is just hitting everything, and nothing we do on defense is working. We can't get a stop, and we just got to figure it out on the other end of the floor, and we got to kind of get rebounds where it matters and kind of scrap for the last couple possessions here or there. And I think, Michigan kind of acquitted themselves relatively well in that regard. If you're Dusty May and you're looking forward to it. Now, his quote was kind of interesting. After the game, the quote I pulled was, he said, "It's like your grass growing. You don't realize it needs cut until you take a couple days off and see that it's growing." Our grass was probably growing a bit under our feet. We weren't quite as active or determined, and our processes haven't been as good lately. And that's the thing that I think is interesting for Michigan to take away from this game beyond the sort of tactical, look, if a team hits 46% and hits 15 threes against you, you're going to be in a tight game kind of no matter what. It's that sort of complacency and like, hey, man, we're just beating everybody by 30. This is easy. And then all of a sudden it stops being easy, and you have a couple games where you look much more like a normal college basketball team and not the historically good team that they have looked like and that we've been talking about them as for 3-4 weeks now.
And I think they needed to convince themselves that they could bleed. You know what I mean? Like, this was one of those things where, you start dominating all these games and you have no idea. Just, the invincibility complex definitely came out this week. And even in this game in the first half, right, they're up 14 points. Elliot Cadeau has a great first half. I think he ended up having 18 or 19 points in the first half. He doesn't score the rest of the game, even though he did do some good stuff as far as creating for others, had some nice, assists in the second half. But for the most part, it just felt like Michigan had this lead, felt like the game was under control. We're all good. We're at home. We're good money here. Game's over. As expected, we're going to blow out yet another team. And this was the first time that I think like a lesson was learned. And I know, you hear this a lot from coaches early on in the season, Tom Izzo, Roy Williams, some of these coaches that have talked about sometimes losses are lessons. And I think Dusty May kind of, like you said, in the post game, piggybacked on that idea where, look, you don't want a bunch of losses because then you're not even going to be in the conversation to go win the tournament. But sometimes when you're this dominant of a group and this good of a team, you need to learn that things can go sideways quickly and a team can get hot and you can lose to a team that you may not feel is as good. And especially when you have, like, I love the Dusty May, Nick Boyd kind of, former player, former coach connection in this game. I thought that was a nice moment after the game. And then there was just the weird Adai Mara goaltending call where that was just like this fluke moment where Mara is probably conditioned as a FIBA guy and someone who played overseas to be like balls on the rim, finish the play, and it's like a natural reaction to that moment. But again, this is college basketball. The rules are different. So it's like it's a fluke thing with that play. It's a fluke thing maybe with Wisconsin making 15 threes. But in a one-game elimination situation that you're going to face in the NCAA tournament, these fluke things can come back to bite you and knock you out of the tournament. So again, this is a major lesson that they learned as a group. I thought that they maybe learned it from the Penn State game. It felt like they didn't quite learn it, obviously. And I think that they'll be better because of this type of loss. But again, it's nice to see Wisconsin scout them as well as they did. And then in the second half when they came out, I know a lot of coaches roll their eyes when you talk about halftime adjustments. I've talked to coaches about this. I'm like, how much halftime adjustments really happen? They're like, a lot of times guys are just going to the bathroom and getting water and just kind of like recharging their batteries. There's not enough time to like break down film that you've seen in the first half, right? But I do think they had a good scout on this team. And I do think they come out 20-7 run to open the second half. And I think that really was a nice counterpunch to this Michigan team and got them back into a mode where they had to react. It was an impressive reaction, but again, a nice win for a team that really needed it, like you said, with Wisconsin. So I don't think I'm really too far down on Michigan, but it is nice to see that they can bleed because now we learned a little bit about this group, and maybe this will make them even better moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's what Dusty May is going to try to use it for. I would be interesting to talk. It would be interesting, and I haven't asked coaches about this lately, and maybe should, because this was a big theme on the broadcast with Hummel and with Raftery talking about it regularly of like, well, you're in the Big Ten now, and these teams scout you better. They know everything that you're going to do, and I feel like that idea comes from a time when both of these teams would have had multiple sophomores, juniors, seniors that had played there before, and they've gone against each other several years, and the coaching staffs have tape of these exact sets of players playing against each other. That's not really the case anymore, even at Wisconsin, but definitely not with this Michigan team, which is heavily transfer reliant, and the best players on the team for the most part are all new. And so I wonder if that principle still applies, or if just the scouting level on a game by game basis is just much higher because these Big Ten teams, a team like Wisconsin, even Penn State, resource wise, just have more resources. They have better assistant coaches. They have more tape. They have more analytics and stuff that they're tracking. They're just more capable of scouting you. I kind of want to talk to coaches about this because I do feel like that idea still exists, and I think it's true, but we're still early enough in conference play where it's like it's not like you have a ton of tape on Michigan playing teams that are similar to Wisconsin. Like, USC is not similar to Wisconsin. Maryland's not really similar to Wisconsin. And so that Big Ten idea of like, hey, you're in the league now, you're getting scouted now, I totally buy it, but I wonder if it's just a function of like, these are just better scouting staffs, they're better assistant coaches, and they have more capacity to break you down in certain ways than your, obviously your LaSalle's, your McNeese's, your Rutgers even, which obviously is a league team, but kind of hopeless. But, look, Michigan, I'm just looking at their schedule again as I was trying to pull those names. Since TCU, which they barely escaped at TCU by 4, and that was 3 days after they had that game against Wake Forest that Wake Forest will regret for the rest of everybody involved's lives. They beat Middle Tennessee at home by 15, and then they went to the Players Era, beat everyone there by like a gazillion, beat Gonzaga by a gazillion, beat Rutgers by a gazillion. I mean, the USC game, I can't remember what the actual stat was, but it was like some X game in a row that a team had spread that they covered or whatever above 20 points or something like that, and they won by 30. And I don't know what the Penn State prediction was, but the Wisconsin spread was like 19 and a half or something, which is kind of crazy for a Big Ten game against the top 50, top 40-ish team in KenPom. And obviously it didn't play out that way. So it'll be, like you said, it's going to be interesting to see where Michigan goes from here. They do have some things, I think, in that game, despite how well Wisconsin shot, things they can tidy up defensively. I also think there needs to be a little bit more trust sometimes on the perimeter about just how big this team is. Like you can get further out. You've got Mara behind you. You've got Lindeberg behind you. You've got Johnson behind you. You've got a ton of size behind you where you can play out a little bit further and not let these guys run their stuff and have the looks that they were having. But it's all kind of minor quibbles, and you kind of look. I think overcomplicating it would be a little silly. You kind of come away from the game and just like, look, man, Wisconsin hit everything that mattered, particularly in the second half. This is how you can lose a random league game against a pretty good team. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see where Michigan goes. It'll be interesting to see where Wisconsin goes. Because like I said, I kind of bought them as I don't think this team is actually this bad. I like them coming into the season. They've been hit or miss, but there's talent there. And they have, it's a good coach and a reliable program that kind of puts up results every year. And I think, it'll be interesting to see where the Badgers go from here too.
It's a good win for the league, right? I mean, it's a good win for the Big Ten because it's not going to hurt Michigan's perception at all, and it's just going to boost and profile and help the profile of a Wisconsin. And I think the one thing that Dusty May is really going to hammer home is defensive rebounding. If I had to guess, that to me, and that a lot of times is just like focus, and it goes back to what we talked about before, where I think they thought they had this game in their hands, and obviously it slipped right through. And you got to give Wisconsin a lot of credit, and Blackwell, Nick Boyd, I felt like they were the two stars of this game. And it was a nice moment after the game, like I said, with Dusty May and Nick Boyd. And that was like, to me, the most new era. You mentioned like how things have changed in college basketball. That was the most new era moment you can see, which is like, oh, a guy that I took to the Final Four, 2 years ago or 3 years ago now, is now beating me in a league game. And we're having a nice sentimental moment after the fact. So what a world we live in.
And if you want to, it's kind of funny, actually, ironically, if you want to kind of realize how good Michigan has been up to this point, particularly defensively, they're still the number one defense in KenPom, despite giving up 1.26 points per trip to Wisconsin at home. right? And it's kind of weighted for like situation and opponent. They're still number one in effective field goal percentage defense. They racked up the kind of crazy historic numbers coming into this game that even this game, if you want to call it an outlier or whatever you want to call it, I think it's probably an outlier in terms of how well Wisconsin performed offensively, shooting the ball. Like, it is that, like, Michigan's still really good. I don't think there's any question about that. And so the ability for a team this good to take a loss like this at home and for Dusty May to kind of hammer home like you guys got complacent, you think you're so good, you're not that good. Wait, several of you have not played in the Big Ten before. You have no idea what's coming for you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It should be an interesting and kind of fun subplot to realize, because I do think there's every chance you see Michigan rattle off, they go to Washington, Oregon, then they have Indiana at home, Ohio State at home, Nebraska at home. You could see them rattling off 5 wins with like an average margin of victory of like 23 or 24 points. You know what I mean? Like, that's easily achievable for this team. And so it should be interesting to see where they go from here. Okay.
Shout out to one. I just wanted to shout out one, Eric Fawcett, right? And it was Kevin Sweeney that did it with him. They did like a scouting breakdown of like how to beat Michigan. What great timing for those guys. They did that during the week, and then Michigan falls and then struggles against Penn State. So I wanted to give those guys a shout out too. That was great.
Just sent it straight to Greg Gard, and there you have it. Easy. Okay. So elsewhere in the Big Ten, like I said, approximately like 12 hours after Indiana football had the greatest win in Indiana football history. And I'm sorry for bringing it up this much, folks, but
I mean, it is a major story. Like, it has to cross, like, I mean, every single sport has, like, now you look at a program like Indiana football and say, like, it's like basically the Kevin Garnett anything is possible moment. It's like you can be the bottom feeder for so long, and then now you can be the top dog. Like, I was watching them and I'm like, is Indiana Alabama? Like, what a world we live in.
What program in college basketball is the equivalent? Because like Indiana was straight up the worst college football program, high major college football program that had existed for forever, right?
It's like Chicago State, right? I mean,
obviously that's mid-major and it's kind of different.
Yeah, I guess. So we're talking Power 4 teams.
Yeah, but I mean, like, is it Nebraska? I don't know that it's Nebraska.
Never won a tournament game.
Tournament before.
Yeah,
they've never won a tournament game. That's true. It could be Nebraska. But if like Nebraska was Michigan and was like bludgeoning everybody. But Nebraska did kind of bludgeon Indiana in a game that Indiana was up, I think, 19 at one point, 16-point second half lead that Nebraska erased. Don Fisher, who had called the football game the night before, the absolute legend of Indiana broadcasting, was there.
He's great.
They shouted him out on the broadcast, which I thought was nice. And I was kind of like, watching the game still woozy from the previous night's Indiana enjoyments, and was like, oh yeah, Don had to get on a flight at like probably 5 a.m. and got back and and didn't sleep, and then went and covered the IU basketball game and delivered his broadcast. I hope he had a great sleep on Saturday night. But it was fascinating game in that you sort of see all of the stuff with Indiana that can make them a really fun team and a good team. Like Lamar Wilkerson was insanely good, particularly in the first half. And if he's shooting and playing that way, Indiana has a chance to beat almost any team in the country because they can kind of get by as a baseline defensively and rebounding and on the basics. And then just their ceiling is entirely dependent on, like, do they make shots? Are they getting open looks on the offensive end with the right people? Or are people playing them so that Wilkerson, and you've seen this in games before, where Wilkerson will not get good looks at all, and you've got a lot of dribbles happening out front that aren't quite getting to the places they need to go. And it was happening in the first half, and then Nebraska took some of that away, and Nebraska did what it has been doing repeatedly this season and just staying in its offensive flow, getting good looks, and eventually, like, overtaking a team that kind of wants to play in the same way and is just not quite as good at it.
Yeah, the first Power 4 team to start 16-0, 5-0 in the conference, first time since 1965, 1966.
Fred Hoiberg, Kurt Signetti. Let's draw up the parallels.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of like wild if you told somebody in 1995 that Indiana football would be, in 30 years, Indiana football would be where they are and Nebraska basketball would be where they are. They'd be like, what the hell happened? Did they did they do some sort of deal with the devil? I don't know what you would say, but Jamarcus Lawrence was great in this game. It was one of those games where, like, I saw it at the bottom ticker, the score when Indiana was up, 15 points or whatever it was. They got up by 19. And I was like, okay, well, now I need to check out and see what's happened with Nebraska. Similar to like the Michigan thing where it's like, okay, this is almost like rat poison games where we've had so much, congratulatory conversations about these programs that they were due for the other shoe to drop at some point. But I was almost more impressed that Nebraska was able to fight back in this game in Assembly Hall. I feel like they showed some type of like fortitude that I didn't even know this group really had, because that was an easy game to kind of write off as like, hey, like what we were talking about with Michigan. Okay, we didn't have it today. Didn't play our best game. Wilkerson was incredible. I think he ended up, with 32 points in this game. So, like, kudos to him for how great he played. But it was kind of an explainable loss at some level. But the fact that they were able to come back, biggest halftime deficit of the season, they were down 9 at halftime, and claw their way back into this game and find a way to win. I know Hoiberg has to feel good about this, both Sam and, Fred. So, I mean, the whole family, the whole Hoiberg family has to feel good about this. And if anything, I just learned that Nebraska has more fight than I thought they did as a group. I thought that they were kind of cruising a little bit, and eventually they were going to have a game like this. And it taught me that, maybe this team, I need to give Nebraska, even though I'm giving them their respect and their due, I need to give them even more respect and due, because I think this is a team that can really be a tough out in the NCAA tournament, which is, again, we're talking about history. This is the program that needs to win their first game, and they look like the group that's ready to do it.
Yeah, I mean, Indiana was up 51-37 with like 17 and a half minutes left in the first half. And Ken Palm's win probability had them at, let's see, Nebraska was at like 6% win probability. So, I mean, at home against, again, Indiana has, they're 25th in Ken Palm. Nebraska was 21 coming in. This wasn't like a scrappy underdog. This is a game that Indiana, I think their coaches probably would have expected to win. But, the 13-0 run for Nebraska midway through the second half, and then a 16-1 run to close it out. And I had buddies who were coming back from the football game in Georgia texting for updates on the plane without Wi-Fi, just using the messaging app or whatever they were doing.
Yeah, free messaging. We love it.
Yeah, got to get the free messaging on there. I do the Wi-Fi. I just take the $20 hit every time.
I'm with you.
Especially once you get on the messaging app, it's like, you've given me a little taste of the internet, but I need the whole thing now. I can't.
I kind of love watching
no
games,
internet. Yeah.
like on the plane. You know what I mean? Like I'll just go to the TV and I'm like ESPN, and then I'm never more locked in than I am on a plane, because I'm trying to distract myself from like being 30,000 feet in the air. So I'm like,
are you a slightly flight anxious guy?
So I've always been terrified of heights, and then I was told in college, right, to get rid of over your fears is like exposure therapy. You got to, get over it. So I jumped out of an airplane in Spain when I turned 21. And, that was the perfect example of like, don't listen to what people are talking about, because it made it way worse. It's like you have an idea of what, free fall feels like at, 12,500 feet, like free fall for 60 seconds in the air as you're going down with a guy like on your back who's got a pull parachute. Once you're falling, you're just like, yeah, this is way worse than I thought. So now my fear is even worse. So, just put that out there to people. Don't do it. Just if you're scared, just stay scared. Don't do exposure therapy.
That is the kind of thing I feel like once you become like 25 or 30 or 35, that someone tells you and you're just like, yeah, you know what, I'm good. But at 21, you're like, you know what? Maybe I don't know. Maybe that's
I was like, I got to get over this. I was like, this can't define my life. And you read all these stories about like great athletes and great like commentators and people back in the day that like couldn't do their jobs because of how much they feared flying and stuff like that. So I was like, I'm from a small town, so I feel like it's kind of built in at some level. So I was like, I got to get over this. Made it way worse. So, there's a little flight tangent for the people.
Well, you gotta get to the point where you're like John Madden and they just have to give you a bus.
Yeah, exactly. Madden's a great one. Yeah.
I take a bus everywhere. There's an Arsenal player who was like this too, Dennis Bergkamp, where he just wouldn't go to certain games where he had to fly. In the country, like in England, he played all the games, and there were games where there's like nah, dude, you got to fly to Italy. And he's like, I'm not doing that. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'll either take the train or I'm not going.
Yeah, he's like, good luck without me. I hope you guys play well.
Deduct it out of my pay. I do not care. I'm not getting on a plane.
I like it.
But yeah, interesting. Okay. All right. Well, good thing Don Fisher doesn't have that fear of flying, because he was back in Bloomington early a.m. He probably got to the arena at like 9 a.m. to prepare for that broadcast.
And think about the
like,
names that he had to call for Nebraska. You know what I mean? Like the pronunciations and all. Like like the scout that he had to do at 5 a.m. preparing for that game. Like you have to give him a ton of credit. I did want to ask you. They showed the crowd. They had football school shirts on. I love. I tried to make Carolina a football school once upon a time. Mac Brown and I tried to make it happen. Didn't quite work. But I saw the football school shirts, and I was saying to myself, like, is that sacrilegious for a state that's like 49 states is basketball? Like the whole slogan and everything. Do you feel like, are you happy with like that identity, or are you mad that people are trying to like slap on football school? Because I feel like I would take it both ways. I feel like I'd be excited about it.
Gosh, I'm not mad about anything related to Indiana football. People can call it whatever they want at this point.
Okay. They're so good. People are saying they're cheating. Isn't that hilarious?
I did see that this week. Yeah, that's hilarious as well.
I thought that was the greatest thing ever. I was like, if Indiana did, welcome to being top dog,
I saw something about them hacking like the video server of all the play
Mark
calls.
Cuban owns the cloud, and Mark Cuban is sharing the game tapes. I'm like, no, they're just psychos that scout the game, and everybody has tendencies. And guess what? They know your tendencies because Cignetti's a maniac. So I love Indiana football. Just to give them credit, football school. You love it.
Yeah. No, yeah. And the football school thing, look, man, I mean, if the basketball program was in like the total dregs, which obviously it hasn't been good lately, but is like, things are going okay this year. It's fine.
New coach, first year. Yeah.
The team has clear flaws and clear strengths, and those flaws will cost it. And it probably has a pretty limited ceiling unless something goes crazy in the tournament, right? If they get to the tournament. But, I mean, I think everyone's just on such a high about the foot. Like, you cannot understand how depressing the Indiana football situation was for and I say when I went there, but for every year before the last 2 years, basically. I mean, there have been a couple highs there and a couple bowl games or whatever where people got excited about a 6-6 season or whatever, 7-5. But like we used to go, my freshman and sophomore year, and it's just like the classic thing of like, yeah, you become you're a freshman, you get the football tickets, you go, you're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, you're at a college, you get to watch the college football, and by the time you're a junior, you're just like, I'll be at the tailgate. I can't do this anymore. I just watch us get beat 60-3 every week. So I don't think. I mean,
it wasn't that long ago where like Michael Penix is at Washington, and Indiana fans are like, "I'm happy for him. He deserved to go to a pro." You know what I mean? Like they're just like, "I'm happy he could go to a program where he could win."
Of course. Yeah, I was happy for him too. It was like, good for you, man. Do what you need to do. Okay, let's get back to the ball. Another team that I continue to find myself grouping with Indiana in that. They have good underlying numbers for the most part. They've played well for the most part. They have interesting things about them that I like and enjoy watching, albeit in different ways in the specifics, but I think have obvious flaws that are going to limit their ceiling this year is Iowa. Mm-hmm. Like Iowa obviously plays a totally different style than Indiana tactically, but they are a similar team in that, obviously it's a first year head coach. There's a lot of transfers there. There's a clear idea of what they want to do offensively that I think is fun to watch again in different ways. Iowa plays super slow. They have the ball in Bennett Sturgis' hands constantly. They had trouble with that against Illinois, but trouble with finding other players. And again, with Iowa, it's like against a lot of teams, they look like a really capable and solid team. But against some teams, Illinois among them, they kind of look like if you put last year's Drake team into the Big Ten. And last year's Drake team won 31 games. That's a good team. Like, that's not an insult in any way, shape, or form to that last year's Drake team. It's just I continue to go back to the Michigan State game at Michigan State, where it just like they look like those guys were like, oh God, like these guys are way bigger, way stronger, way more athletic than us. We cannot get to the rim. We cannot get to the middle of the floor. We can't spray it back out. The stuff that we're running is not really working because they're just more athletic than us. And we really just need Bennett to hit like a step back three once every 3 possessions to keep us in this game. And that it felt a little bit like that against Illinois in certain ways, against an Illinois team that I'm starting to, I have always liked, even back to the summer when it was clear Brad Underwood was going full Eastern Euro with the roster. I'm starting to like them more and more because of some of the other elements they're bringing in now.
Yeah, Iowa, I'm right there with you. I mean, I like the defense. I like the identity. I like Bennett Sturts. There's no, shade to Bennett Sturts. I think some of the NBA talk is a little egregious where, not to get like into mock draft talk, but I'm like, you see some of these mock draft numbers. You're like, Bennett Sturts is going in the lottery. Like, what is going on here? But, it's like maybe we're jumping the gun a little bit there. But
you put him in an NBA. I will say this.
He's a great pick and roll player for sure.
He's a great pick and roll player that is really good at using space. There's a ton more space available to you at the NBA level. The picks start like 35 feet from the rim, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit different than playing against like some of these packed in Big Ten defenses. And you've seen this with, I feel like, a lot of guys. Like obviously very different players, but like Andrew Wiggins at Kansas. I remember watching him just being like, this floor is just too small. He needs to be able to run.
VJ Edgecombe
fast.
Last year.
Yeah, Edgecombe was the same way last year in a lot of ways. Obviously, again, Sturts is a different kind of player. I don't think he's going to be an NBA starter next year or anything like that. But you can see him like coming in off the bench, getting off pick and rolls, being downhill already when he hits a three, and that working a little bit better for him than some of the packed in stuff that he's seeing right now.
Yeah, but the size and I'm with you. I'm just saying the size and the length of Illinois definitely stands out, and it's a lot to put on his shoulders. Where you're just like, "Hey, Superman, come save us! Hit a step back three and get us back in this game." I think they shot like 30% from three in this game. That's not a recipe for them to win this game. It was closer than it looked, really. Like if you were watching this game, I think it ended up being 75-69.
No,
but
it was
again,
not a close game.
Yeah, it was like the score, the box score, not necessarily telling you the full story there. Stojakovic, I think he had a good first half, didn't really do too much in the second half. Boswell was nice to close this game out for this group, but Wagler, some call Wagler. He is Wagler like Wagner, I guess. It's like in the same sort of like, that harsh A. But he's a great player, and he's like someone that I'm really fascinated by. I think he's been a really, really nice piece for this team. And I just think, you're right. I'm with Illinois. I think they're a good group. I think they're a nice, kind of, Avicic, both the Avicic brothers. They're not really doing too much for me, but they're doing enough to be serviceable, I guess would be the right way to put it. But yeah, I mean, I think that Illinois is a really good team. I think Iowa has their limitations, and I think if you want to understand their limitations, watch this game. Would be my take on what happened in this one.
Why is it Wagler? That's just interesting. He's from Kansas, and it reminds me of Christian Braun/Brown.
Yeah,
some of these Kansas guys, I feel like they have interesting pronunciations.
It's one of those things where I tell people all the time, like when someone's a good player, like we learn how to pronounce their name, like that. Like if Wembanyama was, I'm trying not to be mean to like some random European French man that came over. But if he was Tajane Salon, right, we would not know how to pronounce Wembanyama. We would just let it go. Yeah, right. We would not know how to spell Antetokounmpo. Yeah, right. Exactly. Like
people
that's just how
rapidly learned how to figure out how to pronounce his name.
I love Giannis so much. I know the Nigerian way to spell his name, Antetokounmpo. You know what I mean? That's how much that I am a fan of Giannis. You know what I mean? Like I know the Greek way, I know the Nigerian way, and again, that's because he's such a great basketball player, and that's how these things work. So Wagler, he's gotten to the point where we now know how to pronounce his name properly.
I realized when I was listening back to last week's podcast that I pronounced James Najee's name Njai for a couple hits early on, and then switched to Najee, which I looked up before the thing, and then I now that you just said that, it's like, well, it doesn't seem like he's very good. So
well, exactly. That he's a perfect litmus test. It's like I almost, when you were doing that, I was like, do I step in here? But then I'm like, he's not good enough for me to make the correction or like to say anything about it. So I'm like,
didn't see any comments about it. Didn't check the YouTube comments. Maybe there was one, but.
How about when he plays bad, we call him James Njai, and if he has good games, we call him James Najee. You know what I mean? And that'll be the separating point. That'd be good.
Baylor's actually gotten worse since he arrived, which is not his fault, obviously, but they're just not playing very well, and he is not doing anything as the guy who was ostensibly going to destroy the sport. He's had 5 points, 2 points, and 3 points, 2 rebounds. Well, no, actually, he had 7 rebounds against Houston. That's fair.
He had
enough.
some blocks. He had
Yeah,
some
that's
noticeable
okay.
blocks.
Fair enough.
He,
But
you
that
know
was
what he
not a close
reminds me
game.
of? Like, like when you're like your team, like, rec team or whatever it was, church league team, you'd have like a big jersey and it'd be like just a terrible number, like 44 or like 49 or whatever. Like he's wearing 46. It was just like, this is the only jersey number we have for you. Here you go. Just put that on. You're a big guy. So
Guys, I'm supposed to wear number 10. Sorry, man. This is
you're
the only
46.
number we got. I hate to tell you. But it's like the in English soccer, like all the young kids don't get squad numbers. It's like a tradition when you've played for a while, you're a pro, you kind of get a squad number according to your position. So like a right back is like number 5, and the center back's number 3 and number 2, whatever. Number 10 and then number 6 is like the center midfield. And like these 17-year-olds come on the field and they're wearing like 59. It's just like you don't call us in 4 years if you make the team, you get a number. That's kind of where we're at.
I mean, I remember when Messi made the change, when he was like a left midfield guy, and then he got the number 10, and it was like, okay, it's his team now. This is perfect.
Yeah, he's the best player in the world. He can have whatever number he wants. Okay, back to basketball. We got to check back in on Florida here because Brian Ralph for Basket and Review wrote last week about how Thomas Hawk was like taking over for Florida and kind of had. And we talked about him early in the season as like, this guy is 100% making the leap. He is there already. He's their star player. And they kind of need him, particularly early in the year, based on how the guards were playing and shooting even, but mostly playing overall. There were so many instances in big games, you go back to the Duke game, of like, this guy is just carrying any semblance of an idea of a Florida backcourt on his back right now. And he's like a 6'9" guy who was playing the 4 last year for Florida. And he, obviously is still playing great. But against Tennessee this past weekend in a big game, home field was there, rivalry game, you finally saw what Florida can look like with a really good, efficient scoring performance from one of their guards. And Boogie Fland delivered it. He was like as good as these had moments early in the season. Again, against Duke, he had a great second half where he kind of ran the show, and a lot of the offense ran through him, and they needed it at that time of the game because they were finally getting some mismatches with him and some screen action that was working. But against Tennessee, he was 23 points, 6 of 7 from 2, 3 of 6 from 3, 5 assists, 2 turnovers. Like the Boogie Fland that Arkansas fans thought they were getting early in the year last year that didn't quite materialize. The Boogie Fland that I think Florida fans hoped they might get and weren't sure that they would get, but hoped they might. That was the first time we've seen him look like the best player on the floor in a big-time college basketball game in a long time, if ever. And that is, again, like Florida's backcourt from last year is not happening again this year. And they've adjusted, and Hawk has picked up a ton of the slack. But if you can get that from Fland and just a little bit from Lee, but just a little bit, and he was okay in this game, but he's not. I think it's got to be Boogie. Then you're looking at a Florida team with a much higher ceiling than what they displayed in November and December. A team that if you're talking about buying stocks coming out of non-conference and early into conference play, that if you think Fland is this good and can reproduce this, and Todd Golden and staff are going to get this out of him on a semi-regular basis, then you're buying Florida right now.
Yeah, do you buy into the haircut? He got the haircut and he looked like a totally different player. And then a lot of people were bringing up Walter Clayton did the same thing, got the haircut and then turned into the MOP. So maybe there's a formula there in Florida. I don't know what's going on with Todd Golden, if he's got something figured out there. But it did feel like they showed Boogie Fland tape of Walter Clayton Jr. And I'm not, this is obviously just speculation, but I feel like they showed him tape and they're just like, this is how you get your shot. This is how you initiate for us. Like, this is how you find these guys. Like, it just felt like Chinyelu, Hauk. I mean, all these guys were getting the ball like more in ideal scenarios and situations. And then like when they needed him to like put up shots and score points, he was doing it with the rhythm without hesitation. And I felt like if you watch some of the early games with Boogie Fland, it felt like there was almost this like reservation before he made a decision, and that like lack of confidence to make a decision and go for it and get a shot up hurt him. And then maybe at the start of the year, he was almost like too gung-ho to go get a shot for himself. So I feel like he's not found a nice balance. This was by far the best performance we've seen from him in college basketball. And I think in general, if we get this version of Boogie, like you said, you have even more reason to believe and buy into the fact that maybe Florida, I'm still trying to figure out who the best team in the SEC is. Obviously, Vanderbilt is. But is there another team that can give them a real run for their money? I thought Arkansas was one of those teams. We've seen sort of, the bad of Arkansas now, so you can kind of understand them. Obviously, Kentucky was supposed to be. We don't think they're one of those teams at this point anymore. But Tennessee also just doesn't look like one of those teams that we thought would be, after they beat Houston for sure, we thought Tennessee would be in that conversation. But I think Florida is kind of a dark horse. And again, if Boogie plays like this with that front court, they're a team to watch out for when it comes to March.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think they're probably the likeliest candidate. Again, like all year, going back to the summer, we have talked about their starting five balance. And look, they get a little bit off the bench. They don't get as much off the bench as you'd like. Klavchar is fine. He's having a nice year, but I think when you see him come in, and if it's for Fland, if it's for Lee, okay, there's a okay kind of mix there where I don't feel like, and partly it's down to Lee just, particularly against top competition, just not being able to look like he's super comfortable, even though again, it's a weird thing with him because he gets to spots, he's quick, he's not athletically overmatched, he's just shooting the ball awfully, and he continues to shoot the ball pretty badly. But, I think you saw with Fland in the Duke game in the second half, a guy who suddenly remembered, oh yeah, man, like I'm really good at basketball. You could almost just see it the way he was coming off screens and settling down. As soon as he got around the screen and was at sort of the 15-foot elbow spot of just like, oh yeah, I got this. Like this is not super hard for me. Like I can do this. And that was absent early in the Florida non-conference season, and it was absent for parts of the Arkansas season, at least in ways that made the team overall better. And it's a weird situation at Arkansas because he was playing kind of like not half minutes, but he wasn't playing like starter minutes. Like you're our guy, go for it. You got Wagner there, you've got John L there. It's kind of a different situation in that backcourt last year. And
there's like three primaries who are trying to like be nice to each other, but also they're mad that there's two other guys that want the ball. Yeah.
Yeah. And he gets hurt and they start playing well because the roles get defined or for whatever reason. Right. And Arkansas fans may say it's just, look, Boogie wasn't good for us and blah, blah. I don't think that was the case. I think if you go back and look at his numbers in the minutes that he played for Florida, there was a lot to like. And particularly his assist rate, which again, you mentioned, and I think was much more evident in the Tennessee game than we've seen it of, at Arkansas, his assist rate was 30.6%. His turnover rate was 10.5%. That's a really good split, right? That's a really good rate split for assists and turnovers. And we haven't seen that at Florida at all. His assist rate's way down. His turnover rate is up. I mean, it hasn't been the playmaking that he seemed to display when he had the ball in his hands, even at Arkansas in relatively not minimal, but in limited minutes with the injury and everything else last year, has not been evident at Florida. And you started to see it again. Like I said, I think you started to see it a little bit more in the Duke game, which most of those possessions where he looked comfortable and in control of the game happened or ended with shots, right? He wasn't assisting and making plays happen. But then maybe the next step is, okay, I get around this screen, I settle into my little comfortable mid lane elbow area, and then I make a play also because I understand where other guys are going to be. I don't know. I just feel like there's a higher ceiling there if this is like a real thing and not just Boogie had one good game, and as like the Florida fan in my Substack chat is constantly saying is like, well, it's one good game. I'll wait and see. Like the two guards can never play well together at the same time. So I don't know, but I liked it, and I feel like there's something there.
Yeah, I'm with you. And it was also like when Chinyelu fouled out of this game, I mean, he had 17 and 16. Like the crowd gave him the right response, which is just a standing ovation. I mean, he was incredible. He dominated the paint. And like that's what we've talked about with Florida the entire time. It's like with this front court, they really have something special, and they really just need we don't need Boogie Fland to be a superstar for this team to really go. He just needs to be like serviceable, and then to late shot clock, possession has gone awry, we can't get the ball in the interior, like bail us out with like a bucket, and he was able to do that in this game, and he did it well. And I think they said in the broadcast he had missed like 15 straight threes or something like that coming into this game. So I think it was also nice, like the law of averages came back on his side, and he was able to, I think he ended up making at least two. I think he made 2 or 3 threes in this game. So that was also nice to see, and I think that helps with confidence. And man, Tennessee, I've been really disappointed in Tennessee. I mean, the turnovers in this game were just abysmal. So we don't really have to talk about them too much. It was more about Florida, but I was shook at how bad they looked in this game.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're not a good defensive rebounding team. The thing about Florida, they're the best offensive rebounding team in the country by rate and second best on the defensive end, or maybe I have those flipped. But they're 1 and 2, like on both sides of the floor. That's the baseline that front court gives you, right? Because they just have awesome big guys on the floor at all times. They've got 4 to rotate through plus Hawk, and they're like good to go. And they're, Tennessee, that's always been their calling card. Really on both ends, particularly on offensive end. It's still a really good offensive rebounding team for Tennessee, but they turn it over constantly. And the Gillespie transition this year to maybe a bit more ball handling responsibilities than he had at Maryland last year. I'd actually have to go back and check that out. A bit more, and definitely more shot responsibilities than he had at Maryland last year. His shot rate's like 29%. It was 23% at Maryland last year. A bit more balanced in the Maryland offense last year. They're a bit of a mess on the offensive end. Some nights, not every night, but some nights, and they're not as elite defensively as Rick Barnes' teams usually are. And so they're just kind of in a middle ground this year that I guess I didn't really expect either. And Nate Amon hasn't been as good as advertised. At least,
I mean, he looks so different to me. I mean, obviously it's against the high school competition, but when I saw him at the McDonald's game, I'm like, this guy's going to be in the conversation with like, DeBanza, Peterson, Caleb Wilson, Cameron Booth. I thought he was in that group of guys. And I mean, I think he ended up with like 17 points in this game, but he has not played on either end up to snub at this point. So I'm intrigued by that. He just has to get stronger, I guess. That would be like my banal read on the situation. Like he needs to get stronger to make it make sense. But they were saying he put on a lot of weight, or a lot of muscle, and that's hurt his shot. It doesn't look like he's put on 15 pounds of muscle like I've been told. So I don't know. And all that stuff. Every time someone tells you that they put on 15 pounds of muscle or lost 20 pounds, you just never can really take it at face value because usually it's made up. And yeah, it's not been good for Nate Amon.
I mean, given some of the body transitions other Tennessee players have made in the past and their like emphasis on strength and conditioning at that program, I could maybe see that being a thing. But you're right. Visually, it doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't look like
that,
it. Yeah.
But I don't know. We'll see. Maybe the Occam's razor answer is usually just it's hard to be a freshman in college basketball, and we have this year a crop of freshmen who are making it look pretty easy, but that doesn't happen all that often, at least with this many guys making it look relatively easy. You have 1 or 2 every year, and then Evan Miyakawa preseason put out kind of one of his sort of stats and like reports of looking at freshmen. And I think coaches are wise to this as well, of looking at like the number of freshmen in a given season who really impact winning at the highest level are like player of the year candidates in their leagues. And it's a very small list. And more of those guys get drafted because of potential. But like they're, in a lot of cases, it's obvious they're playing against 21, 22, 23-year-old guys. Like it's just hard to be an 18-year-old in that situation if you're not Cooper Flagg, DeBonsa, go down the list of guys.
Abuka, Corey with Stanford.
Yeah, there you go.
He's been awesome.
And you do have surprises too. You do have surprises, but the like number 18 ranked, the last 5-star in the class kind of guy often is not, and that's not what Amon is, obviously, but that often is like, yeah, that guy's interesting. Like you're Mackenzie Mbakos.
Yeah.
Right. 5-star guy, tons of talent, tons of potential. Doesn't immediately like make you an amazing college basketball team. Okay. Sticking in the SEC, we need to mention Vanderbilt, still undefeated. Pardon me. Last week we talked about Nate Oates kind of dissecting Kentucky in merciless fashion after they beat Kentucky, and he went through how Kentucky's big guys couldn't pass, and they went through all the tape and the numbers and their assist rates against top teams versus against bad teams, and so on and so forth. And it was a very Nate Oates quote and approach of just like not super polite, but also he's not wrong, and he's kind of just telling you the math. He did that before the Vanderbilt game, talking about how Vanderbilt hadn't beaten anyone really good, and then Vanderbilt beat Alabama. And I think this is Nate Oates learned a bit of a lesson that, I mean, I'm sure he knew already that Vanderbilt's really good, even if he didn't think they'd beaten anybody really good. This is a lesson I think the rest of maybe the college hoops world needs to know. And again, I don't really pay attention to the AP poll, but I did see today Vanderbilt's still ranked 10th in the AP poll. They're 5th in KenPom. They're 7th in the net. They're 3rd at Torvik, I think. This is like a national title contender that people have not quite gotten their heads around yet.
Yeah, your Final Four pick is what it was.
It was, yeah. No, we don't need to talk about it. We don't need to talk about it. That's okay.
I just wanted to point that out. But you're right. I mean, this was a weird one, like to just see how much a storyline can change in a week. Just remembering where Nate Oates was a week ago, talking about Kentucky and just like dissecting their issues, to then like flip it forward a week where then he's like almost calling out Vanderbilt before this game. And then after the fact, I mean, Tyler Tanner put the world and the country and everybody that cares about basketball on notice that he is a legit guy to watch out for. I mean, 29 points in this game, 7 assists, and he did it in 33 minutes, and he did it just surgically. I mean, it was an impressive performance across the board. Okirike was great in this game. Tyler Nickel has been a really good piece for this team as far as just being like a specialist shooter, and also defensively has been great for this group. Jalen Washington's been nice coming off the bench. You go down the list for this Vanderbilt team. I mean, Duke Miles. I didn't even mention Duke Miles yet, and that's probably the first name you would have mentioned when you talked about this team going into the season. So, like, there's just so much to like about this team. They're obviously a team that's well connected, and I felt like I'm not really sure why Nate Oates gave Byington and the rest of this it felt like he just gave them a layup of bulletin board material. And I'm not really sure what the end goal was for that, but it kind of worked out perfectly for Vanderbilt.
I think it comes back to what we said last week, where like Nate Oates sometimes just says things that he thinks is true, despite what they
doesn't have the bedside manner.
The social reading of other people that might, again, he's kind of like, let me tell you about this awesome math stuff, and also why trains are so cool, and everyone's just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, no, that's
thanks,
that's
coach.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, coach. And I think it was the same sort of source of comment, except that one was before the game and one was after. And you can easily see Mark Byington being like, this is what this guy thinks of you. We've been bludgeoning people, and they don't think you're good. Potential Signetti comparison there, his former fellow JMU coach.
Man, shout out to the Dukes.
That, again, if people want to figure out why Vanderbilt's so good, and you're not, this is a dumb thing to say, okay, but if you look at their numbers, you can see like what they do well and the end product of what they're doing. But you should really watch them, and you should watch them like intently because they are so good at every little detail on the offensive end, especially. They're good defensively too. They're good on both ends of the floor. They do all the small stuff really well, I think. But especially offensively, they are so like minute detail, running different stuff. It all kind of works. They get to the right spots. It is a masterclass of coaching and of player execution too. Like, not to take anything away from these players, they're very, very good. But I think Mark Byington, again, it's kind of like you show up in Vanderbilt. Jerry Stackhouse couldn't get them to the tournament or really all that close for X number of years. They've been kind of in the doghouse for X number of years, even predating his tenure. It's a theoretically, historically difficult program to win at, basketball-wise and football-wise, obviously. And you can just tell with coaches, like, when they have the juice. Show up, tournament, first year. 10 seed, whatever, we're in the tournament, we're good. And then you build on that, and you're here with Vanderbilt now. It's incredibly impressive.
And it's also like Vanderbilt has a great home court advantage with the benches, as we know. And, Kevin Stallings, when he was there, did a great job using that. And one of my favorite Vanderbilt moments was when Boogie Cousins got slammed to the bench by Calipari, back in the day. That was a good time. This game, though, just like it was a great game for Vanderbilt. A nice, like, hey, send a message to the rest of the country. We are who you thought we were. But the fouls in this game were egregious. I was just looking this up. There were 64 fouls in this game. It was just like so over officiated, and it kind of had to be because Nate Oates was like kind of going insane in this game. He got teed up in this game. There were 2 technical fouls in this game, and then you had the weird Phylon. He like couldn't go in the second half, so like it was a very strange, performance all around with like the extra stuff. But like you said, if you just focus on the basketball of what Vanderbilt was doing, then you could come away very impressed. But if you got kind of distracted with the sideshow, and we should give Nate Oates credit because after the game, Nate Oates said that basically the SEC is going to run through Vanderbilt. So he did change his tune drastically from what we saw pregame after playing this team. So, I mean, that was, an encouraging sign, I guess, you learn a lesson there. But yeah, I just wanted to point out the officiating was egregious in this game. Yeah. Like not like it was like one way. Like both teams are getting screwed by how much the officials were involved in this game. So
two foul outs each, and Bristow for Alabama fouled out in 8 minutes on the court, which is
crazy,
truly incredible thing.
Yeah,
that's got to be up there. That we got to add that to our like Tobe Awaka watch of. Need to look up who else has fouled out faster in college basketball this year. That might be 8 minutes is
that feels like the record. Yeah,
that's going to be hard to beat. It's going to be really hard to beat.
It's almost a foul a minute, so that's
5 fouls in 8 minutes is incredible. Incredible work. Okay, last thing in the SEC, and then we'll talk a little Kansas, and then we'll do our mid-major corner, and then we will look ahead quickly to some of the good games coming up this week. There's some really good ones, particularly on Tuesday night, tonight, as you listen to this. Mark Pope had a quote this week, which I did not register or really think about much at all, to be perfectly honest, because I live in the world where last year everyone was absolutely chortling at Rick Pitino.
That's a good word for
during, like, on a sideline interview after, I believe, a win, being like, sometimes I want to go home and kill myself. And everyone's like, haha, Pitino's hilarious, whatever. But Mark Pope said that he, let me actually get the quote so I'm not messing.
Who is a Pitino? He's a Pitino guy, so like, I mean, it makes sense,
Yeah. I want to make sure I get this completely right. So let's see. Mark Pope shares a bit, blah, blah, blah. This headline is funny. Mark Pope shares a very painful quote about the toll of coaching this season. Take it easy. Okay.
Especially if you watched it.
There's no time for indulging in feeling terrible, Pope said. I spend a lot of time feeling I'd like to curl up in bed and kill myself, but that's actually not what we do. We raise up, we get to work, and we find answers. And that's actually where the great part of life comes from, answering the bell when everybody thinks you can't do it. Okay, so I saw this in real time. Not real time, but like immediately after the game or whatever. I'm just kind of like, whatever. It's gotten a lot of reaction, at least among Kentucky fans. And I think number one, the reaction difference between when Pitino has said this in the past, it has to do with if you're winning games, people laugh this stuff off. If you're charismatic, people laugh this stuff off. If you're losing games, people don't laugh it off quite so much. And then you start to get the, hey man, that's insensitive. Hey, this is not cool. And I kind of get that side of it as well too. Like maybe if you're a head coach talking at a press conference, be a little bit careful about how you talk about certain sensitive subjects that for some people in your fan base or elsewhere are like really serious things that they've had to deal with their family or themselves or whatever. Like I do get that aspect of it, right? But I feel like the reaction to it has a lot to do with, because in the actual context of the quote, it's pretty innocuous, but the reaction to it, I think, has a lot to do with Kentucky fans, or at least maybe this is just me putting my views onto Kentucky fans. But if I was a Kentucky fan, I would be sitting here saying, hey man, it's too emotional. Everything is too emotional. You gotta chill out. Like, I know you want us to think that you care about this as much as we do, and that you're upset about it, and that because it's not going well, and we're upset about it, and everybody needs to be upset, and you need to like self-flagellate all the time. But you gotta chill a little bit, right? Like you gotta take the emotional tenor has to come down a little bit, and you just gotta ride the season out, whatever it's gonna be, because it's probably not gonna get a ton better. I don't think Kentucky's got a ton of corners it's going to turn in the next 2 months. We'll see. But there are going to be SEC losses that annoy you, and you just got to kind of like... I feel like he'd have a better chance of retaining his job if he made it clear that he cares, but wasn't like emotionally destroyed by every single bad thing that happened at Kentucky.
It does feel like it's almost like he's trying to placate the BBN, you know, the almighty BBN, and I feel like he's almost become like tortured by that, you know, chase after like trying to get the affirmation of that group, which again is like not necessarily a good chase. Like it's a bad carrot to be chasing is what I would say. Like you don't want to be in a world where you're like trying to play. And look, last year everything went great, and it was until Calipari came to town, right? I mean, if you look at everything when they beat Duke, you know, the pre-Calipari game, it was like, finally we have a real head coach. Mark Pope is perfect. He gets it. He's speaking to us. He knows how to speak to BBN, right? So that was kind of like his way in. That was different than Calipari. So I understand he's like trying to play the hits with these guys. But you're right. I mean, this was he was trying to say like what they probably feel. And if you watch the full clip, like he did not say it like in a very impassioned way. Like the way that it was like framed as the headline made it sound like he was like on the verge of tears and like, you know, needed to go listen to Logic or something. You know what I mean? Like it was not that kind of thing. It was like he, you know, was just kind of saying it in passing as to like, of course I'm upset. Of course, like I feel the same way about where we are in this season. So again, it's just like, it was a perfect example of like what aggregating and like taking a clip out of context can do. And, you know, they're booing him early in that Mississippi State game. Luckily, they were able to kind of find some life and fight back in that game and get a win. That was good for Mark Pope, because if not, he would have had another probably similar press conference. But I just think you're right. I mean, the best way to address this whole situation is just to be like, look, I can't spend my time trying to placate BBN when in reality, like there's no way to make these people, like these are fans, like and they're fanatics, and fanatics are not rational. Like there's no rational way to make these people happy as other than winning a national championship every single year. And even if you did that, they would find reasons to be pissed off, because that's what fans do. Fans are emotional. Fans react in a type of way. So like by trying to placate them and say that stuff, it just feels like, you know, Mark Pope, you can drop the act a little bit and just kind of be who you are, which is a good guy. Like, I mean, and not like in the good guy, like a jokey way that I've made it be. You know what I mean? I'm just saying, like, he actually is like a really good person. We can all tell that if you hear him speak about any sort of topic. So, like, just lean into that. Like, don't lean into trying to be like a Big Blue Nation message board poster and saying what you think they want to hear. And I think that'll save him.
Yeah. I mean, look, in terms of placating Kentucky fans, there's only one way to do that. I remember walking off the court in 2012 in New Orleans trailing John Calipari out, for my job, kind of trying to report as it happened. And him walking and waving to people, and this group of Kentucky fans up on the rafter, sort of where the tunnel goes into the concourse, and this woman screaming at him, "Coach Cal, win it again next year!" And it's just sort of stops. Like, this is what it is. Like, it's just like, this is 15 minutes after you won the national title, right? And it had been a minute for Kentucky to win a national title, and they're just like, next one, we want you to win again next year, and the year after that, and the year after that. And so, like, that's the only thing that's going to make Kentucky fans happy, right? I think my point about this is, like, again, the quoting context is like, again, maybe Pitino, maybe anybody, any other coach, Izzo said this in the past, maybe you need to be a little bit more sensitive about the way you talk about this stuff, because to you, the tossed off comment that you make is like a serious thing to someone else that they've actually gone through in their life, or that they've had someone, with experience with, right? And I had a buddy in college who did that, and it was a devastating thing. But, like, I also, if my friend says that offhand, I'm not gonna be like, "Whoa, man, take it easy." Like, you understand.
Again, it's context.
You understand where they're coming from, and they don't, like, it's not sincere, whatever, and they're not trying to be hurtful. It's not a big deal, is the point. But it plays into, to me, going back to early in the season with Kentucky and his total devastation at the Michigan State loss, and all of these difficult conversations that he's had, and the Louisville thing, and playing around with whether or not someone had a fist fight in the locker room, or whatever that situation was back then. And it's just like, again, we talked about it with Cooley. We talked about it with Shrewsbury. You can see kind of when these jobs start to weigh on these guys, or the pressure of, you need to win soon here, buddy, kind of weighs on you. And he's been in that blender for a minute now. And again, the only thing that changes is winning. And I just think if I was Mark Pope's friend, I would try to take him aside and just be like, "Hey, man, you got to take the emotional tone down. The season is going to be what it's going to be. They may or may not give you another chance next year. I think they probably will. It might be a little premature to do a 2-year type of deal, even at Kentucky. But if you're going to do that, you need to ride out this season and just make it clear, like, you're super focused on the basketball, the emotional side, you figure out, like, take it down a notch." And that might be more useful to him than constantly trying to display to a fan base or whomever, whatever the audience is, that you're as upset as everybody else is. I think that's probably the way to go forward. And in the meantime, like, it wasn't a big deal. People kind of need to chill out a little bit about that.
Yeah, let's all chill out. I think that's, like, the big takeaway with that.
Mark Pope, chill out. Everybody else, chill out about what Mark Pope said.
Yeah. Big Blue Nation also, chill out, Like, you guys, I know it's strive for 9 and everything, but, like, this is not the team that's going to go get you the 9th championship. You probably know that at this point. Jalen Lowe is out for the season, getting, shoulder surgery. So, like, the writing is on the wall. There's a way to, like, forecast this for the future and be looking towards next year and, like, finding positives for next year, whether it's guys that are going to be a part of that team and things like that. So, like, they've been there before. They know how to responsibly, like, support a team, and we know that. So I hope that's where we get to. And Dave Odom said this to me, like, years ago at the Maui Invitational. He was like, "I'm just so glad, like, the feedback wasn't all around when I was coaching, And, like, sometimes, like, there is, like, a level of, like, maybe remove yourself from the feedback loop, Like, you don't need to see everything that's said about you, especially when things are going bad, And that might help everybody out. So that's my advice to Mark Pope.
Got to take a deep breath. So we talked about Kansas last week. I want to touch on them really quickly, because we were like, the Darren Peterson thing is kind of weird. He, at the time, he was, like, kind of playing, not playing. And that's not really an issue anymore. He played 63 minutes across 2 games this past week. So he's playing extremely well. He had 2, Ken Pom MVPs for both performances. He looked great. But Kansas is not playing well. And the weird thing about Kansas now is not the Darren Peterson, like, oh, what's going on with that? It's like, he's playing great, but the rest of the team's not playing well, and they're not playing well at all. And I again, to reach into the headline uh, trove here. Again, this is from a Kansas Jayhawks on SI writer. So this is a presumably Kansas focused writer. I don't know if this is technically like a fan site or what the situation is here. Maybe just a reporter that covers Kansas or writes columns about Kansas. But the headline is Bill Self's tenure at Kansas may be nearing its final chapter. Kansas's disheartening loss to West Virginia this weekend could be a sign that Bill Self's time in Lawrence may end sooner than expected. And this is the first time I've seen like a Kansas website or a Kansas publication or newspaper beat writer or anybody kind of along those lines talk like this. And so I wonder what you made of that, because again, we came into the season being like, these were the two worst years of Bill. I think we talked about it like very early in the year. These are the two worst years coming off of Bill Self's tenure as a college basketball coach ever, basically, going back to like Tulsa, maybe his first year at Illinois or something like that. And this kind of needed to be a big year. And then you looked at the roster and it's like Darren Peterson and a bunch of guys. And those guys, I think, surprised everybody early in the year and maybe raised expectations a little bit. And now we're into Big 12 play and they're maybe kind of closer to where we thought they would be before the season started, even with Peterson back and playing super well. And I don't know how that interplays with those guys playing well or not either. That's another maybe separate conversation, but it's not materializing in the way we thought, maybe going back to Vegas in November.
Yeah, I could I could sense why maybe that could be a thing for Bill Self, because I do feel like Bill Self is perfect as a college basketball coach when the power dynamic is 100-0. And I do think that the power dynamic is probably more tilted 60-40 at this point. And I think a perfect example to give you what I'm talking about, the TCU game, overtime game, great game. Darren Peterson's career high, 32 points in 32 minutes. They were going to lose that game, right? Darren Peterson checked that he has a terrible possession. He checks himself out of the game. He basically just, and we don't know if it's medical or if it's personal or whatever it is. He checked himself out of the game. The game is over. TCU fumbles down the stretch. They put Darren Peterson back in the game because they have a chance to win the game. Darren Peterson, to his credit, comes back into the game, makes 3 very crucial free throws after getting fouled on a 3-point attempt. That was like a continuation thing that we were talking about before, and gets them into overtime. They win the game in overtime. Jamie Dixon is disgusted, as he should be. But again, a great win for Kansas. But in that moment, that felt like, and it has probably for the last like 2 or 3 years for Bill Self, it's like, this is not my empire that I run. Like, this is not a dictatorship. You know what I mean? Like, in the Remember the Titans, like, he's like, this is a dictatorship. Like the Herman Boone, like, that is who Bill Self is as a coach. And I don't think that like that is how it works anymore. And I'm not sure that, the best version of Bill Self comes in this version of college basketball, especially as I see Tyron Stokes, who's like one of the top players in the country, who has moved all over the place for high school and is down to Kansas and Kentucky and all these other places. And most people are saying he's coming to Kansas. So it's like, that would be the another example of like, I don't have control of this situation probably, if you're Bill Self. So like, that to me would be like the only reason to read into the idea, other than health problems, that maybe Bill Self is like a little bit over this. And I think that's why you saw a lot of coaches get out of it before it happened. Tony Bennett, Roy Williams, the list goes on with all these guys that are just like, it wasn't about the money. It was more about like, do I really have the power of like, or the control of the program? Because if I don't, and I have a lot of different hands in the cookie jar, like, what does it look like? And if it doesn't look like my vision of it, then what am I even doing here? Because like, that's what I, was groomed to be as a coach, and I think that for Bill Self, to me, would be like the existential conversation. And that's a much larger conversation than specifically this team. But I do feel like that's what he's going through, because he's got a future number 1, number 2, number 3 pick on his team. And he has Adidas, who that's their guy, and it's their number 1 guy, and they have a say in it. And he's probably got his own agents and people around that have their say in it. And that has nothing to do with Bill Self's vision of Kansas basketball. So I don't think he's going to get fired. I think he would leave on his own accord. But I think if you were to get him in a room by himself and say, Coach Self, like, what is let's do a little self-reflection here. Like, what do you think about where we are? He would, he would probably say something similar. And he's probably really happy he won the 2022 national championship, because that was kind of like the end of, like, I run this show and now the show is wide open. And, that's kind of how the story goes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think you go back to the offseason and them missing on, Darian Williams and missing on, who's the Duke kid from France?
Dame Sarr.
Yeah, Sarr. And that was not necessarily a watershed moment, but it was at least like Williams, especially going to NC State over Kansas. That was a guy that they would always get, even in the portal era. And that sort of showed you that, like, in the way that people talk about with college football now and the way things have shifted in terms of fans and resources and where the sort of center of power lies. Kansas, like a lot of these big programs over the years, and maybe UNC being one of them, have been able to rely on their gravity as an institution, as a basketball program, ties with shoe people, but also just like, we're Kansas. Like, even if you took all that other stuff out of it, they'd still have an advantage, right? Kentucky the same way. Indiana for a long time, kind of the same way, but not really, because it was kind of down to one guy being a complete psychopath, incredible winner in Bob Knight, you know what I mean? But like, there was this old school sort of gravity to these places that you could leverage that I think is probably kind of going away a little bit, and you have to actively maintain it as opposed to just not coast on it, but like, you can't just have that be your expectation, even as a fan, of like, well, like, we're Kansas, of course we're going to get this guy. That's not necessarily the case anymore. And so it's just this roster came into the season, to make a long story short, kind of less powered than you would have thought a Kansas roster would be when you go out and get a guy like Peterson. You'd think you'd be able to plug in other guys, and they tried to and then didn't get them, and then we're just kind of left scrambling afterwards. And so, yeah, it's a weird situation from the beginning. Again, they're still, 18th or thereabouts. Where are they? 23rd in KenPom. You take a road loss in conference play, it's not the end of the world. But they have had a bad January. Lost to UCF, barely survived TCU at home, like you said, and then lose to West Virginia, and then they've got Iowa State coming to town.
But that's a classic Bill Self, like, get it back on the rails win, Like, if I was Iowa State, if I was Otzelberger, I'd be like, I really don't want to play these guys coming off this West Virginia loss.
No, absolutely not. And if they lose that game, particularly if they lose it by a margin, then maybe you can close the book a little bit.
Agreed.
On what we know. But if they win by 4, then the show goes on. And you can do the Leonardo DiCaprio Wolf of Wall Street gif about, I'm not fucking leaving.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's do our mid-major corner real quick. I just want to shout out some of these teams we haven't talked about in a while, but they're interesting. St. Louis, I just want to say I'm really happy that Robbie Avila is meaningfully back in my life, because he kind of took me personally and many people in the college basketball fandom by storm 2 years ago. Last year at SLU kind of faded a little bit just because they weren't very good. And so it was just kind of like, oh, it's kind of a bummer. Like, they're out there doing whatever. And now SLU is like awesome. As good as that Indiana State team was, if not better. And very much, in a league where the at-large situation should be a little bit easier for them. Again, the A-10 is not, this is mid-major-ish corner. I don't know if people at St. Louis consider themselves a mid-major, but because of the kind of the resources around the program and probably what they're paying Schurz and all that. But like, close enough. And it's very fun that Robbie Avila is on another really good basketball team.
Yeah, I think they're top 15 nationally in offensive efficiency, which is kind of like a shirt's calling card. And, it's nice to have the Specs playing some good basketball. And I think they got the most votes, AP votes, that was outside the top 25. So, like, they're knocking on the door to be a top 25 team. And, once you get that number 25, number 24 next to your name, it kind of just changes. As stupid as it is, because the AP poll is, you and I, we roll our eyes at the whole thing. But again, there is some value in it. There is the historical perspective. So to be a ranked team is always nice. And I feel like they're right there knocking on the door. So it's nice to have those characters involved. And I felt like last year was kind of a year zero for shirts. And it's nice to see them back where they belong.
Next team in mid-major corner, Miami of Ohio, undefeated, 17-0. And here's the really interesting thing about Miami of Ohio, and probably their fans will absolutely hate me for saying this. Could this team go undefeated and not make the NCAA tournament? Like, if they lose in the conference title game.
Yeah, right.
Because we will, like, I'm going to pull up their nitty-gritty page real quick. Net team sheet, here it is. Okay. Oh, you know what? Actually, maybe not, because they've got now have three quad 2 wins. Granted, the best one is home against Akron, which happened last week, January.
Yeah, we
3rd.
talked about that one.
Yeah, we did. But they're still undefeated. Now, the vast majority of their wins are in quad 4. They've got 2 quad 3 wins, 3 quad 2 wins, with 2 of them being at Bowling Green and at Wright State. Okay? Haven't played a quad 1 team, haven't beat a quad 1 team, haven't lost to a quad 1 team, haven't played a quad 1 team. This is going to be one of the most interesting bubble situations in recent memory for me as I prepare slowly, like a large ship steering in the Caribbean Sea, carrying Venezuelan oil, to decide like how this is going to happen. Because if you look at the remaining schedule, there's not a whole lot going on, right? And so they are very likely, almost guaranteed, to, even if they go undefeated, have not played or beaten a quad 1 team. Now, me personally, I would be inclined to say, screw that, put them in the tournament. They haven't lost a game, right? Until the conference title, whatever, the MAC title game. But it's going to be fascinating because we've seen the NCAA kind of spurn similar teams, granted not undefeated teams, but teams that don't have quality wins on their resume, but have impressive records and good numbers, whatever. We've seen the NCAA ignore them. And it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. And obviously, the likeliest thing is that Miami will lose a game or 2 or 3 down the stretch, and maybe it won't end up being a conversation. But I'm already girding myself for the continued wins and the continued conversation.
Yeah, we're going to be, there's going to be an SEC team, a Big Ten team that's like 9-9 in conference play, that they're going to be like, why is Miami of Ohio in over us? And we're going to have that whole conversation, and everyone's going to be like rolling their eyes. And, Travis Steele, just in general, I think Travis Steele kind of got a tough deal just during his timeline as Xavier's head coach. You had the pandemic. I mean, it was just a tough draw, and I do feel like he's a good coach. So, I mean, it's nice to see like Travis Steele kind of get like a little redemption arc. And John Gross is, obviously at Akron. I think they're brothers or brother-in-laws. So, like, that's a weird kind of connection between those 2 guys and 2 coaches in that league. So, I mean, it's a good story, and I feel like Travis Steele, it's nice to see him, just mentioning characters that are kind of back in the fold. So it's nice to see him kind of like get ostracized, after his time at Xavier, and then find a nice new home at Miami of Ohio and find a way to win some basketball games. So it's good to see.
Yeah, I remember I interviewed Travis Steele when he took when he got the Xavier job, and my whole feature story like went back into, it was early days of the Athletic, so it had to be like 3,000 words or whatever. But right. It was all about, every time they'd hired a new coach, they'd gone up a level. You know what I mean? Like every single hire, from Sean Miller to, Chris Mack, from before then to after, like every time.
Sean Miller again. Yeah.
They graduated into a new, and that's where the pattern kind of stopped. Is like it didn't really work with Travis. And Sean Miller just kind of maintained Xavier's sort of level that they've kind of been in the last like 10 years now. But their track record of hiring coaches up to that point was really, really good. And and there may be still something there with him. So it would be fun to see him have a little bit of a comeback, going back to the mid-major minds here. Okay, last one, Chicago State, and then really quickly we'll talk about the games coming up this week. Just we'll touch on them real quick, but we have to mention Chicago State Stonehill. This is the craziest game probability chart that I've ever seen in my entire life. Okay, so for people who didn't see this, Chicago State up 2 with 0.1 seconds left in regulation. Game over. You're done. That's the game. You can't even get a shot off in 0.1 seconds. Chicago State calls a timeout. They did not have a timeout. Stonehill hit the 2 free throws on the technical, won the game in overtime. If this had happened to any other program than Chicago State, I would be more inclined to have more fun with it. But I just feel bad for Chicago State.
Me too. Yeah, it just feels like I mentioned them when we were talking about like the doldrums of college basketball too, which is tough. But it's one of those things where you see
that was your first answer for what's the worst program in the country.
Yeah,
you were like, oh yeah, I mean, you're Chicago State type of thing.
I know.
Yeah,
that's why to add insult to injury just feels wrong. But like when you see the clip and it's like Chicago State highlight. You don't think to yourself, well, this is going to be a great highlight. What does Chicago State do? You're saying, what do they do so bad that they got this highlight circulated? And unfortunately, yet again, they deliver. And, a lot of good things are happening in the city of Chicago right now as far as sports. So, maybe, just maybe, there's something that's, good on the other side for Chicago State. I hope so. Their football coach, Bobby Rome, my guy, played at North Carolina. So I'm pulling for the football program, and I keep up with the football program. But the basketball team, we need some better things to happen. And that was like a freak accident. And like I said, just unfortunate to see.
That's a bummer. I did not know Chicago State had a football program.
They do.
That's new. I've lived in Chicago for like almost a decade and had no clue.
I don't know if it's new or what, but yeah, they have a coach. I don't know if they have a program, but they have a coach. Yeah.
There you go. Last mention, and this is barely mid-major, but Utah State's up to 20th in KenPom. Mm-hmm. That program is good, kind of incredibly. It kind of doesn't seem to matter who's coaching. They change coaches like every year or two.
Yep.
Doesn't matter. I asked Odom about that in the preseason, and he was just like, without taking I was like, I don't want to take a ton of credit away from you, right? Like, you did a good job there. You obviously coached the team well. But like the athletic department there has had some like turmoil with like the athletic director and so on and so forth. And it's just like, it doesn't seem to matter who they hire in basketball. It's always a good hire and the team's always good. So congratulations to Utah State, because you're very likely to go to the tournament again this year in what is kind of a weird year for the Mountain West, a swan song for the Mountain West. Okay, we got some good games coming up tonight. Real quick, speaking of Ryan Odom, this Virginia team's quietly looking pretty good. I'm kind of liking their chances against Louisville tonight. I don't know about you.
Yeah, Conwell injury is weird. Mikael Brown, there's like no timeline on his return. You got London Johnson, who was in the G League, that's coming in for Louisville. So a lot of changes for Louisville, and you can kind of see the frustration from Pat Kelsey. I watched his weekly team meeting, that he had with the ACC, and I could see that he was annoyed by the questions about his availability of guys, and I think that's a frustrating part. And if you watch Virginia, the defense has been great, and the ball movement, I mean, you're just talking about like swing, beautiful shot, wide open look. I mean, it's really fun to watch. I feel like Ryan Odom has a good group that kind of knows their roles and has defined it very well. And as far as like first-year coaches, Byington is obviously the one that everyone's going to talk about, but I feel like Ryan Odom's not being talked about enough. So I like this Virginia team. I think they're going to continue to trend in the right direction, and I think they're going to be, we're trying to figure out who's going to challenge Duke in the ACC. I think Virginia is one of those teams that should be on the tip of your tongue. So I'm excited to see what they do at Louisville.
Yeah, they're right there. Obviously, we talked about Iowa State going to Kansas. Feels like a pivotal game for Kansas. And Kentucky LSU, again, to follow up on our Kentucky discussion, LSU's come back down to earth a little bit. Obviously, they've had 3 losses in a row after a solid non-conference start. I think they climbed into like the top 20, top 25 on KenPom, but I don't know that anybody really thought that was real. But this is the kind of game for Kentucky that you're just kind of like, ugh. be careful. Another loss here, and you're in bad shape. And Florida Vanderbilt on Saturday is like my game of the last week or whatever. Last week and a half, 2 weeks. I think that's going to be an absolute blast, and we'll see if one of the Florida guards can, score more than 20 points. Maybe both of them will at the same time, and Florida score like 140.
There you go. Fland versus Tanner, too. That should be a great matchup. Those two guys going at it. Another game I wanted to flag, UConn at number 25. That's right, number 25, Seton Hall. Seton Hall is ranked. So that's another game I'm excited to see, and I hope that they can hang on in the rankings because the Big East needs some love. So I think that'll be a good one. And it's nice to see UConn get tested in conference. They need that for the tournament. So that'll be a good one, too.
Yeah, and St. John's playing at Villanova, I believe, on Saturday as well.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a good one. That Villanova is quietly a little bit like Virginia, maybe not quite to the same extent as Virginia, has kind of quietly become a pretty interesting team. So
yep, Lewis is playing good for Villanova too. So yeah, and that's another first-year head coach that's kind of under the radar, having a good year.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well that'll do it. We covered a ton of stuff. Honestly, like we said, we were going to bounce around. We bounced around. I think we touched them all. As ever, thank you, Tate, for being here.
Of course.
We really appreciate you. Have a great rest of your week. Thank you to our producer, Corey Aldis. Thanks to Trilly Donovan and all the folks over at Basket Under Review. We will be back next week after the Indiana Hoosiers win a national championship in football, which I don't think is something I ever thought I would say on a podcast, let alone in real life.
I'm knocking on wood for you.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. It should be interesting. And we will be back after a ton of awesome, I'm losing my voice, a ton of awesome college basketball. I'm leaving it all on the floor here. A ton of great college basketball games, and we're in the thick of the conference season, and I'm loving it. So thank you all for listening, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.